Hello there, my name's Alex, and I sell cheese for a living. As a cheesemonger and certified cheese professional, I've helped thousands of customers find their favorite cheese. Each week, I'll share what I've learned from behind the counter as we dive into the vast, fascinating world of all things cheese. Welcome to our holiday special of the Modern Monger. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Solstice, Happy Yule, Happy Three Kings Day, Happy Las Posados. Have you ever noticed how winter holidays, basically all of them, revolve around two main things, light and food? You think big fires, little candles, glowing houses, and stars in windows. Tables absolutely buried under food that walks a suspiciously rich line between celebration and this was the only way our ancestors survived the cold without dying. Because in the old days, and I mean really old days, winter wasn't romantic, it wasn't cozy, and it wasn't aesthetic. Winter mostly was, hey Gerald, do we have enough dried fish, hard bread, and preserved cheese to make it to March? And if the answer was no, well, Gerald probably didn't make it to spring. So this episode, and our holiday special, is all about how dairy animals and cheese became the literal backbone of winter celebration. Not metaphorically, literally. From pagan solstice feasts to Hanukkah dairy traditions, or Orthodox cheese pies, to your cousin Karen's annual baked brie. I'm not saying cheese invented the holidays, but I am saying holidays wouldn't exist in the form we know without it. This is the story of how dairy shaped winter celebration, and why so many of our Christmas traditions are actually, well, pagan. And let's get into it. Picture this. It's Europe, pre-Christian, snow outside, the wolves are howling. Your only source of light is a fire. Your entire village is staring down 3 or 4 months of darkness. Everyone looks around and sees what's left to eat. There might be some grain, maybe some salted meat, and of course, cheese. And the village would decide, let's call this a festival. Most winter holidays around the world didn't start off as celebrations of religious figures or mythic events. They started as survival rituals. Humans needed two things to make it through winter: calories and hope. Cheese provides both. Milk is seasonal. Animals don't politely lactate year-round just because humans would prefer it. So when milk was abundant in spring and summer, people had a choice: drink it immediately or turn it into something that could survive the winter. Cheese solved a lot of problems all at once. You could store it, you could easily transport it, you could eat it cold without starting a fire, and it condensed an entire season's worth of milk into something dense, nourishing, and precious. Cheese was not a luxury, it was a lifeline. So, prehistoric people, then pagans, then basically everyone else, built winter celebrations around the foods that lasted. Grains, dried fruits, salted meats, fermented drinks, and especially, my favorite, cheese. Because if you still had cheese in January, you were still in the game. You were still alive enough to make it to spring. Now here's the part that can surprise people, or annoy them, depending on how attached you are to nativity scenes. A lot of Christmas traditions didn't start with Christianity at all. Evergreen trees are pagan, Yule logs are pagan, hanging some greenery that is Roman and Norse pagan, feasting, extremely pagan, and gift-giving, also pagan. Drinking too much and falling asleep in a chair sounds like everybody's favorite uncle, but that has deep roots in paganism, as well as modern America. Long before Christmas existed, Germanic, Norse, Celtic, and Roman cultures were already celebrating midwinter. They marked the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, with fire, light, greenery, and communal feasting. Because when the sun feels like it might never come back, you celebrate the promise that it will. When Christianity spread through these regions, early church leaders faced a choice: fight these beloved celebrations or absorb them. And absorb them they did. Christmas was intentionally placed near the solstice, not because anyone knew Jesus' birthday, the Bible never gives a date, but because the people already had a holiday there, and people really, really liked it. Some symbolism changed, the names changed, and the food though, the food stayed almost exactly the same. Which brings us to the original blueprint for Christmas food and ritual, Yule. The Norse celebrated Yule for 12 days. Yes, the 12 days of Christmas didn't come from a carol, it came from Yule. Yule was a midwinter festival of fire, feasting, storytelling, sacrifice, and staying alive while the sun disappeared for months at a time. And at the center of all these feasts was dairy, because by midwinter, the only food you still had was the food you'd preserved. Historically, Yule's food included aged goat cheeses, some soft curds, butter-smeared breads, cheese and grain porridges made with whey, preserved meats, very early charcuterie, mead and ale paired with whatever dairy survived. This wasn't holiday food. This was winter survival food, elevated into celebration because it meant you'd made it this far. Now, why did the dairy matter so much to the Norse people? Well, cows and goats weren't just animals. They were wealth, they were security, and they were future survival. Milk in the winter was rare. Cheese preserved the nutrition that couldn't be replaced until spring. That's why there was such a thing as Yule cheese. Special wheels made earlier in the year, guarded carefully and cracked open only during midwinter celebrations, which means something important. The act of getting a board out and putting cheese on it and eating it with your family, that tradition is older than the holiday Christmas itself. Even some of our softest traditions trace back to early paganism. During Yule, it was believed that Odin led the wild hunt, spirits moving through the winter sky. Households left food offerings to ensure protection and blessing. Dairy offerings were common, so yes, leaving milk and cookies for Santa is a very modern version of a very old idea. Different beard, same vibes, Odin and Santa. If we were to head south over to Rome, because while the Norse were cracking Yule cheese logs and longhouses, the Romans were doing whatever Saturnalia was. Saturnalia ran from December 17th to the 23rd and was essentially state-sanctioned chaos. The work stopped. Social roles were often reversed. Masters served slaves. People sang in the streets. Gifts were exchanged. Rules got really loose around this time of year. And if that sounds familiar, that's because Saturnalia is baked directly into the DNA of modern Christmas energy. Now, what did the Romans eat during Saturnalia? Cheese. Cheese everywhere. Goat cheese, pecorino, fresh farmer cheeses, cheese-stuffed breads, honey-drizzled cheese pastries. The Romans loved cheese. And they imported it too. Alpine cheeses, Greek cheeses, anything that said, they planned this feast. And the wine, of course, would also flow quite freely. But the cheese anchored it. Cheese wasn't just nourishment, it was a status. When Christianity absorbed Roman culture, Saturnalia traditions melted seamlessly into early Christmas customs. Think candles, small gifts, big meals, and the collective agreement that for a few days, indulgence was allowed. Now, not all winter celebrations were loud. Some were domestic, quite quiet, and in fact, intimate even. Among the Anglo-Saxons, there was Mother's Night, a solstice festival honoring female ancestors, household spirits, and the forces that sustained life through winter. And unsurprisingly, dairy was quite central to this. Milk symbolized nourishment, curds symbolized continuity, soft cheeses symbolized care and protection. The foods included could look like fresh curds, clabbered milk dishes, early soft cheeses, honey milk beverages, and this wasn't about excess, it was about survival through nurturing. Many of these rituals folded quietly into later medieval Christmas Eve traditions, right down to the candlelight, dairy-rich puddings, and intimate family meals. Milk wasn't just food. Again, it was a reassurance of better days to come. Now, here's some things to understand about holiday food. Pantries in your house don't really care what you believe. Even as winter holidays became more religiously defined, many pre-Christian foods survived simply because they worked with winter realities: milk scarcity, stored cheeses, and preserved fats. That's why Christmas dinner, in many cultures, still echoes the pantry of a Norse or Anglo-Saxon longhouse. If we were to look at the basics of Hanukkah, you would think oil, light, and a miracle. But there's a lesser-known tradition tied to dairy, the story of Judith. Judith defeats an invading general by feeding him cheese and wine. Salty dairy makes you thirsty, then killing him when he passes out. Because of this story, many Jewish communities incorporated dairy dishes into Hanukkah. These would look like cheese pancakes, ricotta fritters, cheese-filled buraks, or dairy pastries. Here, dairy isn't about winter scarcity, it's more symbolic, but the timing still matters. Hanukkah falls on winter. Cheese fits what's available, what's comforting, what's celebratory. If we were to look at more Orthodox Christmas, for many Eastern Orthodox Christians, the lead up to Christmas includes the Nativity fast. No meat, no dairy. So when the fast ends, what do? Well, people would run towards cheese like it owed them money. Traditional Orthodox Christmas tables include banitsa, which is a Bulgarian pastry with feta, gibanica, which is a Serbian cheese pie, tyropita, which is a Greek cheese pie, and vatrushka, which is a Russian sweet cheese bun. After weeks of restraint, dairy became a symbol of joy, abundance, and a little spiritual release. Even though Christmas today is framed as a Christian holiday, the food is still doing some ancient work. And let's look at some of the modern classics. Cheese boards, a symbol of abundance, very special wheels you'd only get once a year, and communal eating. The medieval Yule energy, but plated a little nicer. This is really an excuse to go all out and eat a ton of food. Let's look at baked brie and pastry-wrapped cheeses. Cheese plus grain plus heat equals a classic medieval winter food. We didn't invent it, we just inherited it from our ancestors. If we looked at fondue, I've said this before, but alpine winter survival food. You take melted aged cheese with wine, eaten with bread communally around a nice fire. Now it's a cozy, enjoyable event with friends, but back then it was just survival. Now let's look at something like a butter cookie or enriched breads. Butter equals winter dairy. Cookies equal portable calories. Your sugar cookies are basically Viking power pellets. And thinking of cookies, we go back to milk and cookies for Santa. Again, it's an ancient offering to spirits and a Roman festival food. This concept was repackaged in the early 1900s as a lesson in hospitality, but it's the same ritual with a new branding. Underneath the modern holiday lies centuries of pagan ritual, ancient survival food, and the quiet work of dairy animals. So what does this all actually tell us? First, cheese represents survival. It's how people made it through the dark. Second, cheese represents celebration. You didn't crack into that special wheel unless it really mattered. Third, cheese represents community. Dairy animals required care, milking, feeding, protecting, and that labor was shared. Fourth, cheese connects ancient and modern holidays. When you eat cheese at Christmas, Hanukkah, Yule, or any other Orthodox celebration, you're participating in traditions older than most written language. And finally, cheese represents hope, because it's survival turned into celebration. So here's my big takeaway. When you sit down at a holiday table this winter, whether it's lit by candles, Christmas lights, or the glow of your phone while you try to hide from relatives, and you bite into something cheesy, you're not just eating food. You are participating in an unbroken line of winter traditions stretching from Viking longhouses, Roman banquets, Jewish resistance stories, medieval feasts, Orthodox celebrations, and modern cheese boards. Dairy animals, cows, goats, sheep, all shaped our holidays more than any single culture or religion, because they were there for us in the cold and in the dark, when we needed something to keep us alive long enough to celebrate anything at all. Cheese is history, cheese is culture, cheese is survival turned into pure joy. And that to me feels like the real spirit of the season. Happy holidays. Go eat something cheesy. My name is Alex. This has been the holiday special of The Modern Monger. Hey, you're still here. By making it through the outro music, you have found the special holiday bonus content. And this part isn't going to be exactly about holidays, but more why food mattered enough to become sacred in the first place. Long before anyone argued about calendars, before Christmas dates or fasting rules, milk was already holy. In the Bible, the promised land isn't described as rich in gold, it's described as a land flowing with milk and honey, because milk meant the animals were healthy, the land was fertile, children would live. Milk wasn't a drink, it was a future. Across cultures, milk symbolized purity, protection, and life, something meant for the young, the vulnerable, and the growing. That's why monasteries became centers of cheese making. That's why dairy shows up after fasts. That's why breaking bread with butter and cheese meant peace. Milk was what you gave when you wanted to say, "You're safe here." But not all dairy animals stayed holy. Goats had a rough rebrand. In ancient pagan cultures, goats symbolized fertility, vitality, sexual energy, and abundance. They were linked to wild gods, forest gods, party gods, the kind of gods who laughed loudly and drank deeply. When Christianity arrived, those gods didn't disappear, they were just recast. Horns became threatening, hooves became suspicious, hair became sinful. The goat, once a symbol of life, became a warning. It's the same animal, but a different story. And yet, even as goats were blamed, people kept milking them, kept making goat's milk cheese, kept feeding their families through the winter. Because belief systems change faster than hunger. And now we go back farther. Before Christianity, before pagan gods, before humans even knew what winter was, in Norse mythology, before the world existed, there was nothing. Just ice and fire, and a vast, empty space between them. Where the ice melted, something appeared. A cow. Her name was Adhumla. She wasn't created, she emerged. From her udders flowed 4 rivers of milk, and that milk fed the first living being. Milk didn't come after life, milk made life possible. As Adhumla wandered the frozen void, she licked the ice. It was salted ice, and slowly revealed the first god, carved free by her tongue. In this story, the universe doesn't begin with violence, it begins with nourishment. A cow, milk, salt, and time. So when ancient people saved cheese for midwinter, when they built feasts around dairy, when they honored cows, goats, and sheep, they weren't being quaint. They were remembering something very old from their ancestors. Stories that when the world was cold and empty, milk came first. That when winter was long and cruel, cheese kept people alive long enough to tell those stories. That food isn't just fuel. Food is proof that life wants to continue. So if you've ever wondered why holidays feel heavier with food, why dairy shows up again and again, why cheese sits at the center of celebration, it's because somewhere deep in our bones, we remember the oldest story we know, that in the dark, in the cold, when nothing else was certain, there was milk. And that was enough to begin. Now, this was a fun retelling of old Norse mythology, but I thought it meant a lot to include this as to why somewhere in our history, the Norse gods and the pagans and everything they believed in kind of got watered down into what we think of as far as Christmas or winter traditions currently in modern day. Truly, thank you for listening to this episode of the Modern Monger, and have the best holiday you possibly can. However you decide to celebrate, just make sure you celebrate with cheese.